Great. So welcome to the session. Today's session is about exploring imposter syndrome. And we're going to be talking today all about what it is, how we can recognize it, what it looks like for you, and obviously some tips to work through it, overcome it, combat it, just work with it so that we feel better. Because I think imposter syndrome is something that can sound quite scary. But actually it's in all of us, but let's get into that in a moment. So welcome to the session. Thank you for joining. And for those of you who are watching on replay, thank you for being here. Just to give you a really quick bit of intro about me, I am a certified mindfulness and performance coach. I do lots of work with the guys of Working Well, which is great, running corporate sessions for clients, and also I do one-to-one work all around workplace well-being, mindfulness, just feeling better in ourselves, feeling less stressed, working with our energy better, because I think stress is inevitable, but it's how we react to it, how we manage it to lead happy, healthy lives. So that's me. So we're going to be using Menti in this session. Menti is a great polling tool. There's only a few of us in the group on live, so we'll see how much we use it, but it's quite good for doing anonymous polling. You don't have to enter any details, so it's completely anonymous, even in their system. It's not like they capture any details of yours. So you can either use the code, if you go to menti.com and you can enter that code, or you can use the QR code. And I would advise you to do it probably on another device like your phone, so that you can obviously keep this up on your screen. It can be quite hard to jump between screens, and the questions will come up as we go along. So if you log in and you don't see anything on your screen apart from a big heart that you can press, then don't worry, that's totally normal. So I'll just give you a minute to jump in. Great. So let's move through. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about confidence and why I think it's a myth. We're going to be talking about how imposter syndrome shows up, so what it looks like for us. We're going to be talking about our beliefs and where our beliefs come into it, and how we can start to really connect to our strengths. And then we're going to be talking about what we can create as a new script. So quite often imposter syndrome tells us something about ourselves, and we're going to be looking at how we can reframe that into a more positive way. So first of all, the impact of imposter syndrome. Why is imposter syndrome so big? It's become such a talked about subject because it affects so many of us. And I would say actually, 3 in 5 employees experience it. I think 5 out of 5 employees experience it. It's just the 3 that are being honest about it. I think all of us have feelings of imposter syndrome at some point in our lives. 94% don't discuss it at work, which I think is really interesting. So it's still very taboo, and we can talk about why that is. Why do people find it hard to discuss it? Because we don't want to admit, that we don't feel enough, that we're scared of what people might think of us. Interestingly, twice as many women than men experience it. And there's a really interesting research around promotion. So when we apply for a promotion, men apply for promotion when they meet only 60% of the qualifications, whereas women apply only if they meet 100% of them. So there's something around confidence or courage around that, of why women feel like they have to be 100% qualified for something before they apply, when really, if we're applying for a job, it's usually a step up, a step across. We're never 100% qualified, even when we're doing the job. I don't know what either of you think about this. Do you, does this resonate with you? Do you think it's
yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
I can think of quite a number of jobs that I haven't gone for because I thought, oh no, I haven't got that. I got all the rest of it, but not that.
Yeah, not that one thing. And that one thing will hold you back. What were you going to say, Robert?
No, it does surprise me that the prevalence, and I wasn't aware that 6% of women. Sorry, the generally men apply for jobs at 6%. Yeah. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah,
I thought
there's a really interesting. There's a really interesting, I don't know what to call it, a case study where they gave a woman a job description and asked her to read it and asked her if she would apply to it, and she said, I can't apply to this because I'm not qualified enough. And it was her job description of the current job she was doing. I can't tell you the context of, you know, I'd have to look up and see like where it was done. But interesting that, you know, we don't, and this is where imposter syndrome often shows up in, we don't often feel qualified in what we're doing currently, let alone something we're applying for that feels out of our reach. So how do we get over that feeling of, am I good enough? And we're going to talk about that today. So, you know, what is imposter syndrome? Often it's the thing that holds us back from trying, like we said, for trying for a new job. It's not our ability. So where does it come from? You know, what holds us back is not, are we capable, but just that in that decision making of, shall we try, shall we step out of our comfort zone? And that's where I think it's a myth of confidence, because actually it's courage. It's taking the courage to try something, even if we don't feel ready, we don't feel, you know, whatever that word is. So what word would you share if you've ever experienced imposter syndrome? What have you not felt enough of? You know, what's that word for you? Is it qualified enough? Is it capable enough? Is it, you know, I would say in my job, I often feel like I'm not experienced enough, because I think in workplace wellbeing, there's always something more you can be doing, you know, and I have to remind myself of the experience I do have. I definitely don't always feel experienced enough as a parent, but I think from what lots of people have said, you feel like that most of your parenting lives.
I would say for me, it's qualifications.
Okay.
I've got the experience, but I can't prove it with a qualification.
Okay. So if you're happy to share it in Menti, if you've got it open, then that's great, so that people can see it as they watch the recording. But great that you're sharing it verbally as well, because I think the chat that people won't see. So not qualified enough, not confident enough, not capable enough. Yeah. And this is where I think there's a myth around confidence, because we think confidence, we need the confidence in order to do something, but actually the confidence comes from trying. So, you know, there's a real myth around people born with confidence, and I don't think anybody's born with confidence. Confident people have just taken the step to try, to put themselves out of their comfort zone, to take a risk. So I think, don't wait to have the confidence. Remember that confidence will come as you take those steps. And I think experience, you know, qualifications, we can always feel that we're not experienced enough. And then you read about these people who are, you know, Richard Branson didn't have qualifications to build an airline, to create an airline, but he did it because he had the courage. You could call it confidence. You know, he was a risk taker. He, you know, was ballsy enough to just go for it, and he did it. But what did he have? You know, was he as experienced as the person who created British Airways? They probably didn't have any, you know, are there any qualifications? Did he have an engineering qualification? No. But, you know, it's around that feeling like you're ready to take the risk. Rejection proof, that's a good one. So yeah, often we're scared of failure, we're scared of rejection, and so we don't take that step, when actually, you know, rejection is part and parcel of trying, I think. Al says comparison. Yeah, absolutely. Often we hold ourselves back because we compare. We think, well, that person can do this or that person can do that, and therefore they must be more confident, qualified, capable than me. Great. So just remembering what it is helps us when we're in that situation to, you know, step past it. So these are some feeling not enough that you may experience. You know, this is how imposter syndrome may show up with you. And I'd love you in a minute to either share in the chat or share in person if you can recognize any of these. So self-doubt in your skills. You know, quite often we can credit external factors, like we can say, I was lucky that I got that job, when actually it's not about luck, it's about skill or experience, or, you know, maybe it's about the potential that people see in you. And I think often when we think about ourselves in a role, you know, how can we recognize this in our team members? So this whole session, I'm always going to encourage you. Do you both manage people, or you? No? Do you manage anyone, Robert?
No, I don't. I just set my own business up, but I've managed for 30 odd years, and I recognise some of this stuff.
Yeah.
So there's many interviews.
Yeah. So this is stuff that may come up for you. It may come up for people that you work with or people that work for you. You know, as Al said earlier, you know, decreased self-confidence. When we look at our peers, it's very easy to look at someone else and then feel less than, because we think, well, I don't have this and I don't have that, when actually we can remember what we do have. We're all unique in our skills. Feeling like a failure in front of others, being a perfectionist. And then when we push ourselves so hard to achieve something, we can overwork in order to strive to that level and burn out. And that's, you know, where setting high standards comes in. So these are some ways that we can sometimes feel not enough. as imposter syndrome shows up? And you said, Robert, that you recognise some of these from interviews. What about you, Tracy? Do you recognise some of the, you know, you don't have to share which ones if you don't feel comfortable, but anything?
Yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
I'm actually coaching someone at the moment who is, I think, experiencing imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And hers was triggered by a comment a colleague said that got back to her.
Mm.
And it's made her really, really doubt that
Yeah.
she's good enough for the job.
I see.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah. So that
this
came around, you know, the
yeah.
From a comment a peer made.
So I'd be interested as we move through this, what you've worked with her around that, and if some of this, because there's some things that come up in a minute that could be useful. But yeah, you know, I read something really interesting. Just because someone, if we're thinking about feedback, just because someone thinks something of us doesn't mean it's true, and B doesn't mean it's valid. So, you know, if you think about getting feedback, are you asking the right people? Are they people whose opinions matter? Are they people whose opinions are influential in that situation? And that's not to say that we shouldn't care about feedback, but there's feedback and then there's feedback. So yeah, that'll come up in a minute. So the 5 types of imposter syndrome. So these are from model created by Dr. Valerie Young, to identify what imposter syndrome looks like for different people. So the 5 types that she identified are the perfectionist, the natural genius, the expert, the superhuman, and the soloist. So before I explain what each one is, I'm sure you probably know some of them, but before I explain, which one do you think you might be or have experienced?
For me, it's the perfectionist.
Yeah. Okay. What about you, Robert?
It's probably more not feeling that I'm expertised enough.
Okay. Okay. And I'd say for me it's the soloist, but let's explain them and then you might change your mind. So the perfectionist is someone who has really high expectations of how things are done. So when we don't meet our own expectations, we feel like an imposter or that we're failing. A natural genius, I would say is when you feel you're naturally good at one area. If you're then not succeeding in other areas, you feel like a failure. So maybe you're really naturally good with numbers, but then in anything else you do, like, you know, public speaking or writing, you instantly think, well, I'm not very good at this, but only because you're comparing yourself with something else that comes fairly naturally. An expert often focuses on how much they know, so it can never be enough. And that, I would say, that feeds into qualifications. You know, there's certain careers that I think we can always feel like we need to learn more before we can do it. And actually you learn as you go, you know, you grow as you go. The superhuman is someone who feels like they have to be able to do everything. So, you know, you take on everything at work, you can't be seen to let something drop or delegate. And the soloist, I think, I definitely feel this as a mother, I focus on who's doing it. So I feel like I need to do it all. And if I'm not, then I'm failing, when actually it's okay to ask for help, both at work and at home. So do you still feel, having heard sort of more of an explanation, do you still feel like you identify with those, or would you change it?
I can see elements in all of them.
Yeah.
And it's particularly at different times in my life.
Yeah.
Now I don't need to, at my time in life, I don't feel that I need to prove that I can do everything.
Yeah. That must be very freeing. Yeah. Yeah, and that's really true, actually. We do, I'm sure we experience some of these, you know, earlier on in our career, later on in our career. You know, Robert, you said you do your own thing now. You know, when we set up our own business, certain of these pop up that may have not occurred, you know, when we were working for someone else in our personal life. Okay. Anything else you want to share or ask or talk about on this? Any other thoughts you've got?
It's true, when your situation changes, you're right. And I think with experience, it's become less and less. But certainly when I left the corporate world and went on my own, it was almost like starting again, thinking, oh my goodness me. And you felt very de-skilled and very, you know, as if you're competing with all these people that have been consultants for years. Yeah. And you have to really remind yourself that what you have, rather what you haven't.
It's a whole new industry, absolutely. Yeah. And it's funny that you said that. I was approached by somebody who wanted some mentoring advice, and she was setting up her own business, and she was she'd worked in brand consultant, like branding, you know, fashion brand for years, and she was now setting up her own fashion brand consultancy. And we were talking about it, and she said, wow, so you set up a business that was completely different to what your career was, and that had never occurred to me. And she said, that must have been really hard. You know, I'm setting up something that's exactly what I've done for the last 20 years, and I still find it difficult. And just the fact that she said that made me think, oh yeah, I set up a business that was nothing to do with what I used to do. I used to work in events. And I think sometimes we forget either what the reality of the situation is, i.e., yes, this is hard, or we forget actually we do know a lot, but we're doing something very different. You know, so quite often when we step into something very new, like public speaking or a new role, or, you know, it's good to just remember, of course, this is going to be difficult, or of course, we're going to find this challenging. It's new to me. And I think that's where sometimes the perfectionist or the superhuman, we feel like, well, we should know how to do this. You know, we should be able to do this. So just being kind to ourselves. Okay, so this is an interesting one. Again, for yourself, maybe for someone in your team, so, you know, when you work with people, where does imposter syndrome show up? Because quite often it can show up in different parts of the cycle for us. So for someone, it might be when they first start a role. And, you know, I was talking to Matt and Al about this earlier, and we were talking about, you know, the context of this session. And I think in wellbeing, we often see this with people who are new in their roles, because wellbeing is a relatively new concept in you know, in the workplace, in terms of the role of head of wellbeing or wellbeing lead, or, you know, head of people and culture even. So quite often when it's a new role or even a new company, it can feel quite scary. You know, that's where we think, am I capable enough? Do I have the qualifications? I don't have any experience. And for some people, it may be, you know, in the cycle of doing the work. So maybe you're confident in the role, and then as time goes on, perhaps Tracy, if you know, I don't know the context at all, I don't need to, but for the person that you're talking about, you know, maybe it's partway through a project or partway through a role when you get feedback, and then it makes you doubt, actually, you know, am I doing this well? Am I okay doing this? Maybe it's at the end of a project, it finishes, you know, and then you think, hang on a minute, what was the feedback? Did people think I was good? Was it lucky that I did well at this? You know, maybe it was a fluke, it was a one-off. Or perhaps it's towards the end when you finish and you don't get the validation, or you don't get the feedback, and then you doubt yourself and think, oh, I'm a fraud, I'm not capable of doing this. So sometimes it can be useful to look in the cycle of where it comes up for you, because, and again, you know, as you both rightly pointed out, different times in life, different situations, it can come up in different ways. So any thoughts on this, or anything you can recognize from this, maybe where it's come up?
Yeah, I think the feedback is interesting, because when you present things, I don't know, webinars, for example, you don't really get any feedback, and yet when you're at work doing it, you get quite a lot of feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you kind of don't get that, you know, that validation and approval. Not that you're seeking much of it, but you want something back.
Yeah, absolutely. You want something. And again, it's, you know, if somebody said that wasn't very good, does that say something more about them or you? And that could be really easily knock your confidence, but actually that could be saying more about what they came to the webinar looking for, and they didn't get that for whatever reason. It wasn't the information they were after, and therefore for them it wasn't relevant. That doesn't mean that the content wasn't good. You know, it goes back to that idea of maybe you were looking in the wrong place for the feedback. That wasn't the right person. You know, if I'm pitching my work to corporate clients and somebody who has their own business comes along, it's not relevant to them. If they give me feedback, that doesn't mean that informs what I do. That's just maybe not the right person for me. But I think we can so easily forget that and take it very personally, and then that makes us doubt ourselves, and then the cycle kind of continues. So it's just remembering
Absolutely.
or noticing where that where imposter syndrome comes up. You know, some people are really confident when they go on stage and they do public speaking, and then as soon as they come off stage, all those feelings of doubt of, was I any good? Did people like me? You know, that maybe will stop them from doing it again. Whereas somebody else may never get up on stage because the fear gets them beforehand. So just noticing where it comes up. So yeah, where has imposter syndrome shown up for you in the past? So is it at the start? Is it when you're applying for something? Is it, you know, around public speaking? Walking into a room full of people? Where do you notice it showing up for you?
Well, I'll go. Mine's probably giving presentations, really. So I naturally have to fake it till I make it. I've done it for years, but I still get nervous, and I kind of, I suppose a little bit of nervous is fine. But I have to really put myself in the zone to make it successful. And no one knows that I'm really nervous underneath. But it takes a lot of energy doing that stuff.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And how do you find yourself stepping from that place of nerves into the doing? Like, what is it that helps you get that courage?
I think it's a bit of positive self-talk, things like, no one in this room knows more about this subject than me. I don't believe that.
You tell yourself that, but it's true, yeah. I remember when I was starting out and I did a lunch and learn, and quite a few people in the room were like my peers from my old industry, from my event industry. And I remember one of the ladies was very nice, and she came up to me afterwards and she said, you said a lot. You said at the end, does anyone have any questions or want to add any? I can't remember how I worded it now, but I basically asked if anybody could kind of add to the stats or the research that I'd given. And she said, just remember that you know more than anyone else in this room. That's why we've come to this. But because I was new and I was starting out, I was a bit like, I'm sure somebody knows more than I do. Even if they do, they still come to learn something from you. So, I think it always is worth remembering why you're there and why those other people are there. Even in a workplace, you're in a role for something you bring to that role. If it's not experience, it's personality, it's your values, it's your potential of what you can create in that role. Maybe you weren't hired for the past experience, but you were hired for the potential you can bring into that role. So I think it's always, important to remember that. Okay, so we've got here submitting work, applying for something new. So I think new is always the tricky one when it's out of our comfort zone. Okay. So something I read that I thought was really interesting is when it comes to imposter syndrome and courage, it's not about changing the feeling, because like you said, Robert, that feeling, those nerves are going to be there. It's about, you said it beautifully, it's that positive reframe, that positive mindset. It's about changing the thought. We have to get comfortable with feeling fear, with feeling uncomfortable, with feeling doubt. And, I think if you look back at some of the, the biggest sort of the people that we assume have the most confidence, Michelle Obama has talked about feeling imposter syndrome, lots of actresses and actors have talked about feeling imposter syndrome. They feel it, but the thought is, I can do this. I'm going to give it my best shot. It's okay if it doesn't go as well as I thought. Whatever that thought is, that we need to just change to get ourselves over the hurdle. So I'll talk briefly about beliefs here, because I think beliefs has a really big part to play in imposter syndrome. And we believe things that inform how we show up. So it may be that you were always told, you're not very good at something, or, you have to be able to do it all by yourself, or maybe the environment that you work in, gives you certain beliefs that make you feel a certain way. So I think it's worth exploring what influences your beliefs and then questioning them. Are those beliefs true? Because sometimes, we hold beliefs that aren't our own. They're our parents or our bosses or, whoever else it is. I've been told in roles before that I was too soft and too emotional because I had quite a people-facing role. For years, that made me feel like I wasn't sort of tough enough or strong enough, but actually that was my greatest asset in those operational well-being HR roles, because that's what I brought to the role. So was that really my belief, or was that, my boss's belief? So remembering that sometimes the beliefs we hold aren't actually true. So what influences our beliefs? It can be life experiences, like I said, it can be, our family, our social environment, it can be situational, the workplace we're in, it can be cultural, or it could be hereditary, things that we've carried down from generations. It can be physical, beliefs that, you're not, I don't know, let me think for an example. I'm always told that I have too soft a voice. My husband is always saying to me, excuse me, speak up. So for years, I used to think that, I'm not great at public speaking because I can't own a room. that then impacted my confidence and maybe probably speak quieter. And I've had to really relearn that, you know, and doing this kind of work is brilliant for that, because I've had to relearn sort of how to speak up and speak louder. And now I don't believe that, but I had to question that belief. And it wasn't even a belief, it was a physical, probably a, you know, softly spoken, that was kind of a physical trait, but it informed then where my confidence came from. So what, you know, do you recognize anything for you in this that has maybe held you back from taking a step or doing something? And I know I'm putting you both on the spot, sorry.
I think I spent most of my time in large corporates, and some of it's quite damaging, because they want you to be a certain look, a certain way, sound a certain way, mold them, or you're not part of our culture, or we don't expect you to act like that around here. And actually, what I like about it is challenging some of that, but it doesn't make you feel great about it. You know, I've got, particularly, you have to go to London and everyone speaks very clearly and properly, I used to think. And I've got from Lancashire, and I speak a bit fast and a bit loud. And someone said to me, "You're really not going to succeed, Robert, with a voice like that." You know, so I thought, well, okay, thanks for that.
It's funny you should say that, because I'm always conscious of my Bristolian accent.
Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
And thinking, you know, I don't sound like Joanna Lumley. I sound more like Wurzel Gummidge.
And isn't it funny, because that's not at all what other people hear, and some people do, but you know, what's an opinion, you know, just because they're used to it or not used to it. But it's funny, the beliefs that we hold, either because of what we've been told, or assumptions, or, you know, culturally there are assumptions of what people from London are like versus what they're not. So yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how things influence our beliefs. And again, it's just worth noticing, because when we can notice, we can identify what might be holding us back. So when we talk about limiting beliefs, a limiting belief, if you're not sure of it, is something that we believe about ourselves that holds us back. So it's a negative belief that we hold. I'm not, you know, I'll never make enough money. I'm terrible with money. I'm not fit enough. You know, I'm not clever enough, whatever it is. It then stops us from taking a step. I always used to tell myself, I'm too risk averse, you know, I'm not a risk taker. And so if you ask any of my friends or family, for probably about 10 years before I started my own business, I used to say, I'd love to start my own thing. But then I would always say, but I'm just not a risk taker. You know, I need financial security, and I need, you know, stability. And actually, it wasn't until I met my husband, who is much more of a risk taker, that I had the confidence to do it, because that was a belief I held of myself, which actually isn't true. And even if it is true, you can work through it. So noticing what beliefs might hold you back, and beliefs are there to protect us. We have to remember that beliefs are there to protect us from failing, because as human beings, we see failure as negative. We see it as a threat. We see it as danger. You know, failure is trying and not succeeding and picking ourselves back up. So again, just remembering that, if, you know, our limiting beliefs are there to protect us, but very often they hold us back from trying something new. So again, if you're comfortable to share in Menti, it's anonymous, what limiting belief may have held you back? Because again, people will see this and hopefully be inspired by it. Yeah, exam conditions, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah, I was always told my brother was like the academic one, and I was more street smart, which made me always feel like I you know, wasn't good at exams, when actually I don't think our grades were ever that dissimilar. But yeah, not clever enough, exam conditions. Anything else? Or anything else you want to share? Time, security, not corporate enough. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Time, do you mean I don't have enough time? Like there's not enough time to do things?
Yeah, and it's you know, you think, well, if to do that, I would have to study for 4 years, yes. And yeah. I can't be bothered to do 4 years of work to get something that I don't know if I'll achieve it in the end, or do anything with it. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Or even in the other respect is the right time.
Yes, that's really true.
Especially with young, you know, if you've got a young family, family becomes before, well, for me, my family comes before work every single time.
Yeah.
So I would want to invest all my time and energy in my family than I would in taking a qualification.
Yeah. And again, you know, sometimes it is, you know, it's true that you don't have enough time, and that's the fact of the situation, and you know, there's nothing else. Sorry, Elsa, she's off, but Matt's going to join. That's great. Thank you for being here for this part. And you know, sometimes it's true that you don't have enough time, and that's all it is, and that's okay. But it's just worth exploring if there's something else beneath that. Like, actually, I don't feel, I'm scared of not achieving that qualification. You know, what if I put in 3 years? You know, and then I remember thinking that, you know, I would have loved to do a psychology degree, but when I was younger, I said, oh, I don't have time. It'll take me 5 years to qualify. Now I look back and I think, what's 5 years? But at the time, 5 years felt like forever that I didn't have time to do. So are you scared of something else? Is there something else underneath that that's holding you back from doing it? Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't, but it's always worth kind of picking apart. Oops, sorry about that. Picking apart the belief and seeing if it's really true, or if it's the belief of someone else.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And the opinions of others is a really interesting one, because yes, very often, oh, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
It says I've lost contact. Okay. Yeah. Opinions of others is an interesting one, because very often we allow the beliefs of others, as we've said, to hold us back. So other people think, you know, you don't have time. How could you start studying when you have a young family? How could you, you know, do this when you already have a job? Why would you leave the comfort of your secure corporate job and take a risk on something new? That's someone else's belief, not yours. So it's, again, worth recognizing if those beliefs you hold are really your own. So what can we do about it? So this is the how do we overcome it part. I want to share these with you to see if you've tried some of these, if you could learn from some of these. You know, Tracy, you talked about the person that you're coaching. You know, could some of these help, like reframing the negative thought? I know, Robert, you'd shared already about, you know, focusing on the facts, the positive mindset, what's true, what do we know is true. So I'll talk you through some of them, and then you can tell me what you think. So what's fact and what's feeling? Sometimes we focus on the feeling, so we think about the fear, the nerves. We forget the facts. The facts are, you know, I've done this before. I know I'm capable of standing up in front of a room and talking about this. I know, you know, with the right support, I can do this job. So focusing on the facts, because again, our feelings are there to protect us. You know, imposter syndrome comes from our beliefs, comes from our fears. They're there to keep us safe. But if we lean too much on that feeling, we forget, you know, what the facts are of the situation, the stories. Making friends with the feeling. We can feel so uncomfortable with the fear that we run away from it. But actually, I think people, and this is where I come back to courage, I think people who do those brave things are just okay with feeling uncomfortable. They're okay with taking risks. They're okay with the potential of failing, because they've made friends with that uncomfortable feeling. And yes, it feels uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that we can't sit there for a little while in it while we work through it. Reframing the negative thought. So when we reframe the negative thought, yes, this is scary, but imagine how great it will be if I do it. Flipping that script in our head. So instead of thinking I'm not qualified to go for that promotion, you could think I am experienced in X, Y, and Z, and actually, you know, the experience that I got over here can translate to this current role that I'm applying for. So if we can reframe that negative thought, how can we look at it more positively? And that's not, you know, toxic positivity, papering over it. It's thinking, yes, okay, I feel like this, but I can reframe it and say, okay, this is an area for me to grow. I can step up into this role. You know, I have lots to give to it. There's lots of potential I can bring to this role. Saying it out loud. I think, you know, going back to that earlier statistic I shared, about 94% of people won't talk about it at work, because I think there's so much fear around saying it. And just by saying to someone, you know, I'm really nervous about doing this presentation, that could eradicate 50%, 60% of the nerves. So I think sometimes just by saying it out loud, we know that we're not alone in feeling this way. You know, what was it? 3 out of 5 people feel it. So many people feel imposter syndrome. If you ask them, just very few people would admit to it. building evidence, I think, is a really key one, practical steps, because when we build evidence, we have a bank to say, we know we're good at this. You know, I know I'm capable. I know I'm experienced. I know I'm qualified. I know even if I'm not qualified, I can do this because I stood up and talked at my, at my friend's party in front of 60 people. So why can't I stand up and talk in front of 60 people at work? You know, there's always some evidence if we're ready to look for it. Learning from others. Again, I think imposter syndrome often shows up when we compare ourselves to others and feel less. But actually, is there an opportunity to learn? If that person's doing it brilliantly, can we ask them, well, how did you do it? You know, how did you get there? How did you learn that? Rather than seeing it as a lack, what can we learn from them? Building a support network, you know, so important to have people around us that support us, that can tell us we're good at something or we're capable when we don't feel it. And then celebrating your wins. I think this is one that we so easily overlook because we focus on what we don't know, what we can't do, rather than celebrating actually, you know, if you think about it, you set up your own business, you took on that new role, you built a wonderful family, you prioritized the people that are most important in your life. There are so many wins that we can look at, but very often we look at all the things we didn't do. So from this, which ones of these, jump out at you? Which ones of these do you think you're not very good at doing generally? Any thoughts on this?
I think the make friends with the feeling.
Yeah.
I don't
So
think
again,
I do
Tracy,
that.
sorry, I talked.
So I was sneezing. It's make friends with the feeling.
Yeah.
I don't think
you're not
I
very
do
good at doing
that.
that.
And I don't think I'm very good at saying it out loud.
Mm.
The other things, not only do I do, but I encourage others to do it as well.
That's great. And where do you think, if you don't mind me asking, and you don't mind sharing, where the saying it out loud, why do you think that is from what we've talked about?
Because it just makes you feel a bit vulnerable.
Mm.
And that if you say it out loud, you'll never be asked to do X again. Because it's something, that you don't like doing. So rather than challenging yourself and going that extra mile and having a go and usually doing it well, you might miss out on opportunities.
And that's the difference between, I think, confident people. They try even if they don't feel capable. And the sad part is they probably don't talk about it either, but they still feel it. And I think sometimes saying it out loud to the right person, maybe you don't shout it from the rooftops at work, but you say it to a person who you feel comfortable with, who you know is safe. You can say it to them without feeling judged, without feeling, seen as a failure. Because even coming home and saying it in your personal environment, so that you said it and it's out there rather than holding it in. Often when we hold these feelings in, that's when they can grow and feel bigger than they are. Yeah. Robert, anything you want to share on this?
It's up to focus on facts and build evidence. Sometimes I just don't do that enough, and therefore it kind of, you sort of set doubt yourself a bit. I certainly don't celebrate my wins as well as I should as well. But those two jump out at me. The build evidence, the actual rational thinking. The facts are this, and the evidence is this. But still, I kind of push it away sometimes.
And again, I think it's so easy when you work for yourself to forget all of the good things that you do and focus on all the things that you haven't done or you can't do. But and why sometimes it's great to get that external validation. Well, what are your clients saying? What are the people you work with saying? But not so much that you then rely on that. So that, as you gave in that example, Tracy, if the person gets negative feedback, it's terrible. And, you have to have your own sense of validation internally, but of course it helps when other people you have the facts when you're feeling a bit, wobbly, you have the facts of people saying, you are good at this. We value your work. We recognize your work. Okay. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but there's a little exercise I want to share with you that I think can be really powerful in this situation. And it's called the Inner Diamond, and it's created by someone whose name I've forgotten now, but I will have to credit them. I'll find their name, but it's called Inner Diamond, and it's a kind of a coaching exercise, and you can do it physically if you want. So you can draw it if you want to, or you can just think about it. You take a piece of paper and you draw a diamond, and then inside the diamond, you write down all the things that you know about yourself to be true. So everything that you know is fact, focusing on the facts and the evidence. You know that you are, you know, a great parent, you know that you are a great business person, you know that you are, you know, you have good clients, you know that you have a good reputation, whatever it is. All those facts go inside the diamond. And then outside of the diamond, all the things that get in the way of you feeling like that and remembering those things. Comparison, you know, not qualified enough, you're not data driven enough, you're not financially savvy enough, you know, all the things that get in the way of you feeling those things inside the diamond or remembering those things inside the diamond. And like I say, it's a really nice exercise you can do either for yourself, you can do it with people you work with. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to think about it. And like I say, whether you want to write it down or not. Because when we can focus on the inside things, those are things in our core, those are the facts that we know. And all the other things around it are things that are blocks or obstacles or things outside of our control. They're the beliefs of others, their assumptions, their expectations of others, their, you know, unrealistic expectations that we've put on ourselves. I should be this far along in my career right now. I should have done X, Y, and Z, even with a family. I should have been this far along in my business by now, earned this much. You know, if you strip all of that away and you focus on the inner facts, those are the things that keep you strong. Those are the things that help you take that next step, help you face the fear in a new situation. And so I think, you know, focusing on the inner diamond, it helps keep our foundations really steady. Any thoughts on that, or anything that kind of jumps out at you when we talk about that?
It could be a useful exercise to work through with my coachee. Because I've been trying to build, doing a lot of strengths-based and positive coaching to help her get over this, this feeling that she's not good enough for her job. And I think her actually focusing on that and doing it could be really beneficial for her.
Yeah, it's worth a try. I think the question that you can ask is, how do you feel when you're at your most confident? So when you get your best feedback, when you know, if that feedback that had come back had been really positive, what's the feeling that you have? Because all the words that hopefully will come up are capable, confident, qualified, you know, skilled, appreciated, valued. That's what you want to focus on. And all the other stuff outside, all your limiting beliefs, your blocks, your, you know, your worry, your fears, they get in the way of you feeling that bit in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
it's I'm trying to talk around as well, because this is one person's opinion out of a sea of about 200 people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you know, how important is that person? You know, why are you giving them agency inside your head?
Absolutely.
When everybody else thinks you're doing a cracking job.
And that's the thing, you know, it's for them to remember that other people think they're doing a good job, and looking at the evidence, you know, what's evidence in their role that they are doing a good job, and focusing on that. And you know, as you said, Robert, you know, reframing that thought's going to keep coming up, but you have to fake it till you make it. You have to keep reminding yourself until you truly believe it. And that can take years. Hopefully it won't take this person years, but you know, it can take years before you fully feel capable, and then probably the you know, the goalposts shift and you feel unsure again. And you know, I think parenting is a really good example, because so often you hear from parents that just as you master one phase of bringing up your family, you know, the goalposts shift and you feel like a complete novice again, you know, as babies to toddlers, and toddlers to sort of, you know, tweens. I hate that expression, but you know, sort of under teenagers to teenagers. You never have fully mastered it, because the environment, the world, the people around you are changing. But what are those inner things that you know that remind you that whatever the situation, you're capable? Any other thoughts on this?
I think it's good to play to your strengths, and I mean, I feel like an analogy here, but even a diamond's got its little flaws in. It doesn't make it any less expensive. But as long as you you keep playing to your strengths, and knowing that something you're not great at everything, but that's all right, because nobody else is. And that's what you need to stop comparing yourself to some. I'm talking to myself here, by the way.
No, but that's a brilliant observation, and you're absolutely right. You know, nobody's perfect, nothing is perfect, but you play to your strengths. That's really, really good, a really good way of thinking about that. I'm going to remember that. Yeah. And again, that's where we doubt ourselves. We compare ourselves to other people who are doing it better, but actually, whose opinion of better? You know, whose benchmark of better? You know, one diamond shines more brightly than another. This analogy could go on. It's great. Yeah. So when we say connecting to your core, you know, Tracy, I don't know how in your coaching, if you do any kind of sort of feeling based work, but for me, this is really around feeling, like tapping into the feeling, you know, connecting to that core feeling of when you feel you're most confident or you're most courageous, you know. And I do a lot of sort of meditation, mindfulness work, and it can be a really nice thing to do if that person is so is into it. And if not, you know, just thinking about the feeling.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a great idea. And when she was very distressed at our last session because something had happened and it really upset her. And I just asked her a question. I said, will this thing still have the same impact or the same effect on you in 1 to 6 months' time?
Amazing. What did she say?
And it made her stop and think, yeah, absolutely. I would probably have forgotten all about that. And it won't be that important, and it won't be so earth-shattering as it was that particular day.
Yeah, you're right. That's really, really good in reframing. You know, it matters so much to me right now, but in X amount of time, is it going to be that important? And chances are
it won't be.
Yeah. But things feel so huge at the time, don't they? Yeah, that's a really good question. Okay, great. So the 3 key things to take away from this then is, you know, just as we said, outcome. If you reframe the fear, what outcome do we want? So rather than thinking about all the things that could go wrong, or all the things that we're afraid of, where do we want it to be? So I you know, the outcome I want is to be in that job. The outcome I want is to have great feedback from my colleagues. The outcome that I want is to be standing up on a stage speaking. So if we can focus on the outcome, that can give us the courage to take those steps there. The second part that we've talked about is evidence. So what facts do we have that we already have the courage, the experience, the ability to step out of our comfort zone? And I think support is really important, because when we have the support, when we don't feel strong enough, we can turn to the others around us. Really, I would add 4 steps, and the 4th is celebrating our wins, because I think when we celebrate our wins, we get good at recognizing what we're doing well. I put 3 on here. So, you know, support network is probably the 3rd. So those are the 3 things I would say, plus celebrating our wins, that are really important to start making those small steps. And I think it is small steps. You know, it's each time something happens, it's taking it as an incident alone. And, you know, a bit linking to what you just said, Tracy, it's one incident. And if one incident goes well, that's great. But if one incident goes badly, it's just one incident. It's one time, it's one job that we've applied for. It doesn't mean that all the jobs we applied for are going to be terrible, or that all the feedback's going to be terrible. So it's just taking it one step at a time. Yeah. So the last thing I would ask you is, how can you start building evidence of your strengths and wins? Or, you know, if you're talking about your clients, how can you start building that evidence? Is it about creating an email folder of all the good testimonials? Is it about asking people for feedback? Is it about writing a list? Is it about, you know, I don't know, what other ideas have we got? How can we start to celebrate?
Reflections and journals, you know, making notes to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Capturing good feedback that you get. So if somebody says, oh, that was a great job you did of X, actually making a note of that somewhere. So I don't have it could just be a little doodle pad by the side of you.
And then that's the thing that you look at when you're feeling wobbly the next time, to remember, actually, you know, I've got evidence. That becomes your evidence of what you're doing well.
You can also like save specific emails that you might get with job well done, or
that's what I really encourage clients to do, to have kind of a, you know, I am brilliant email folder. You know, so that
You
you
could even,
don't rely on your own memories when, when you're not feeling confident. You can focus on the facts. The facts are, I've got an email folder full of emails from people saying I did a good job, or I'm good at this.
Yeah, or you could do a draft email to yourself once a week and add to it during the week with, oh, my manager said this to me, a colleague said that, a client said that, and send it to yourself each week or each month.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you do tend to lose things that you've done a good job of because it gets buried underneath all the other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's where it comes back to sort of celebrating our wins. We so easily focus on all the things we haven't done at the end of the week, as opposed to, making a list of these are all the things I've achieved. I have done these 10 things. I haven't done these 2, or, these 2 things didn't go quite the way I planned, but that's okay because all these great things I did do. Great. So anything else that you want to share? And I'd love just to finish with sharing this quote by Gillian Anderson, which I really like. It's not a matter of being fearless. The fear is sometimes constant. It's about moving forward regardless. Courage means feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I think there's a book, I forget by who, called Feel the Fear, Face the Fear and Do It Anyway. Suzanne Jeffries, maybe? Did I make that up? Yeah, but yeah, and it's a big concept. It's the fact that we will always feel fear when we do something because it's normal, but it's how we move through that fear, so we're not waiting to feel confident, we're not waiting to feel fearless, we're not waiting for the fear to pass, we're doing it anyway. Yeah.
And sometimes that adrenaline and that fear and that nervousness actually adds to how well you deliver. I know Robert said about earlier on with doing presentations and getting that tight knot in your stomach and the God, I'm going to be sick or whatever, but then you generally tend to find that afterwards you've done a cracking job. So
it's that idea of there's the difference between fear and excitement is one breath. So we feel fear and then you take a breath and actually that moves into excitement because these things that we do that are new can be really exciting. Standing up on a stage, going for starting a new job, getting promoted, they're exciting things, but it's allowing that fear to turn into excitement. Great. Okay, well, thank you so much for being active participants of this session. I know there are only a few of you, but it's been great. Is there anything else that you want to ask or you want to share, or any other thoughts that you've got?
Well, I'd like to say thank you. It's been really useful. And it's given me some ideas as to how I can support my coachee. And also things for me to think about personally as well. So it's a bit of a double whammy.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much.
And I want to say, Tracy, you're absolutely right. I mean, some of this isn't new for me, but what I've really learned again, I'm not doing it. You find yourself not doing what you're coaching and what you're doing. So we kind of, it's really interesting. What stops me being kind to myself? What stops me doing this stuff? And that's interesting when the more I do it, I think there's so much more I need to do. So it's all about learning and applying it, but being disciplined to do it because it is good stuff. This. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. But what you said there was a real nugget, because you said about being kind. And I think very often when we tell other people, we're so much kinder to other people. Oh, don't worry, of course that's scary. Of course you're going to feel the fear, but we don't say that to ourselves. We're much harder on ourselves. Well, why don't you know how to do it? Why didn't you do that well? Why do you feel scared of that? And I think it's having that kind voice for us and remembering that, we are like everyone else. We're human. We're going to feel the same feelings. So yeah, I think, you're right. We are much tougher on ourselves than we are on other people, and it's about being kind. Well, thank you very much. I'm running a
Thank
course in the Working Well community. So just to let you know really quickly about that, it's going to be shared in the academy part. So it's a 4-session course. So if you think you might be interested, or anyone you work with or you know, it's all around managing our stress, managing our emotions, and creating a mentally healthy workplace. So it's more workplace focused, but it's got a lot of this stuff in it, you know, why we feel stressed, where those feelings come from, how we can manage them better. So yeah, do take a look if you're interested. Thank you so much for both being so chatty, because it would have been very hard if you hadn't been. So I really appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully some of this is useful. And Tracy, do let us know how it goes with the coachee. It'd be good to hear.
Okay.